Any stories shared in this podcast have had names and details changed for the confidentiality of clients. Any resemblance to someone real is coincidental. Hello everybody, thank you for joining us for today's episode. Today we are going to talk about boundaries. And we're going to be talking about boundaries for the next couple of videos. So more specifically today we are talking about how to hold boundaries when you're feeling pressured by anyone, a friend, a family member, whatever. So in the past we've talked about like what boundaries are. And I think a lot of people have some idea of boundaries, but a boundary is only a boundary if you're willing to hold it. So if you're caving under pressure all the time, it's not really a boundary. So how do you not cave under pressure all the time?
I love this question, and it's one I talk about with my clients a lot, because we'll sit in session and we'll talk through what is a boundary, how do you set a boundary, where do you need a boundary, and just like you said, it doesn't matter unless you're going to follow through with it and keep that boundary firm, right? So I would say the very first thing that you have to do is sort of take a step back and gain some insight in your life about what your boundaries are. You have to have really, really good insight about that. One of my clients and I were talking the other day about how her boundary is that she's not going to drink when she goes out. And that boundary sounds very, very firm and clear. But then when I started to ask her more about it, she said, well, you know, I won't drink when I go out, but these occasions are
New Year's.
Right. Well, except for New Year's, right? Mm-hmm. Well, think about like as a friend or somebody who's even trying to support her, and then you see that kind of discrepancy. On one hand, she's saying, look, I don't drink. And then on the other hand, she's saying, well, it's New Year's. Well, if you're not really, really clear with yourself and others about what your boundaries are, then this is going to be impossible. So very first thing, you need to gain the insight about what your boundaries are exactly. Right? Make it a little, we're always encouraging people to be more flexible in their thinking, but this is kind of the opposite. Be more black and white. What exactly is the boundary?
And to be really honest with yourself too. Like if in the drinking example, like if it's just drinking on New Year's, is that really going to be not drinking? Like that's not the boundary anymore. And is that really even helpful to my goal? If drinking causes me problems, I probably shouldn't do it on New Year's either.
Right.
So I think it requires some introspection and some self-honesty, which is sometimes kind of hard to do.
Right.
One of the things that might be a little bit uncomfortable in this idea of self-discovery or developing this insight is it might not be a bad idea to ask the people around you too. I find that I ask people different philosophies and principles on things that I've been thinking about to figure out where my boundaries are with things. So that might help to develop some insight into things too. Okay, but now we've decided we're going to develop a boundary. We know what we like or what we don't like and trying to figure out where to set that boundary. How do we then get good at setting the boundary in the first place?
This is something that I coach my clients on very specifically. So in session, lots of times as therapists, we'll sit and do something called role play, which is basically this interaction where we go back and forth and practice something. So with my clients, I'm specifically reenacting situations with them and having them practice things like, how do I communicate this boundary to other people? How do I use my words and say exactly what I mean in a way that's kind? I mean, you don't have to be a jerk when you're setting boundaries, sure, but assertive, right? So you know exactly what it is, and now you take that next level and you start practicing communicating exactly what that is in a very assertive way.
Yeah, even if it's just in your own head, and it's just like having the template and having it in your pocket, like locked and loaded.
So in some ways it's kind of like a rehearsal, right? I'm not at the situation where I need to implement this boundary yet, but I'm rehearsing how I would say it, what I would say, what I would do, etc., so that when that happens, it just comes or flows naturally. Come to think of it, that I did that with a client a couple of weeks ago too. It was really cool. I got an email where she was like, "You'll never guess I was so successful at this." I was stoked. Super cool.
That is so great. And, you know, I think for people who maybe have a little more social anxiety or this is a little harder, I think it can be a good idea to use the broken record method, where you come up with 1 or 2 lines, short lines, not big, long descriptions, short lines of exactly what it is that you're going to say. Thank you for the offer, but no, I'm not interested. right? And that's the line that you continue to say over and over and over again, so that you don't constantly feel like you have to justify or come up with a new description or argue with the person about it. They don't need 10 million different descriptions as to why. They need you to just stick to what you're saying. So have your 1 or 2 lines and just repeat it like a broken record until they get the point.
I like that because I feel like a lot of my clients run into the problem where they feel the need to over-explain when trying to set a boundary or hold a boundary.
That's me, dude.
Right? Like if your friend texts you, hey, you want to go do this thing? And it's like, instead of saying, oh, no, sorry, I can't, it's like, oh, I would, but blah, blah, this, and I got this, and I got, my dog needs to go outside and whatever, right?
Uh-huh.
And that's just not, that doesn't feel good for you to be put in that spot. So
Right. Well, and then the problem with that is then your boundary becomes a discussion with the other person, because then they start saying, oh, well, you needed to do this with your dog. Well, what if you did this instead? And now all of a sudden you have to come up with 10 other reasons why you can't do that thing. And so then your boundary is a discussion as opposed to a limit.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, so pushback, right? So now you're in the situation, you've rehearsed it, you get there, you set your boundary. It's a very clear 1 to 2 sentence thing with an apology at the end, right?
But there needs to be one.
Yeah, but yeah. There probably doesn't need to be one, and we all do it anyway, right? But your friend really, really wants to hang out with you, right? And so they push back a little bit. Now what? How do you stay firm with that?
I've thought a lot about this too. I'm from a family of people who we don't fight. Fighting, like, we're not going to sit and have this argument about all of these kinds of things. But I would say my family is pretty firm in their boundaries with each other. And it's really interesting to sit back and kind of watch, because one of the ways that people in my immediate circle do this is with a little bit of a laugh. Thanks, but no. I already said that's not going to happen, right? So that it's kind of still this like light, it kind of has this like light attitude to it, but it's still very firm. There's not any discussion of, well, maybe. It is still very assertive.
I also feel like you run the risk of, if every time you have a little pushback you give in, all your friends are going to know that. I'm just going to push right through every single time. And then it's not a boundary at all anymore. But I think that you probably get less pushback the firmer you are. You get lots more pushback if you leave little cracks.
A little wiggle room.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Hence the reason for not being so verbose when you do boundaries.
Yeah.
Right? Then there's no real wiggle room. So it almost sounds like practice makes perfect. It almost sounds like you just behaviorally rehearse and do the thing that you said and said and said.
Right.
Yeah. Plan it in advance. Have it in your head. Practice.
Mm-hmm. Practice inside, practice outside, all of those things.
Okay. Well, hopefully this has been helpful if you struggle to hold boundaries, or just interesting even if you don't. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.
Thanks.
Bye.
If you enjoyed today's video, please like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. We've got other videos for you to check out and more exciting things coming soon. So thank you.